have held a closed session on the consideration of personnel matter, evaluation of candidate for commission staff position pertinent to the Government Code Section 11126A-1. There has been no decision made during the closed session, so there's nothing to report out at this point in time.
There was one decision made, our last item.
Go ahead.
We are not going to report the names of the 4 finalists.
There's been a request from the public on releasing the name of the 4 candidates that that we're interviewing, and the commission has made a decision or has given direction to staff in not releasing the names. This is the standard practice of the state of California, and so we decided to adhere to that standard. Anything else I forgot?
I think it was good.
All right, so we're back on the general session agenda. I think we finished discussing the item number 3, the commission governance. And I'd like at this point in time to initiate the discussion of the schedule, specifically schedule for the balance of this particular meeting that we're operating to. And I think before we're finished, we want to discuss the subsequent meetings of the entire commission, as well as the perhaps the scheduled meetings for the subcommittees as well. If there are other scheduling matters that we want to discuss, this is the time to consider that. So in terms of, I think a number of commissioners have expressed interest in terms of planning the meeting, not just one meeting at a time, but on a long-term basis. And it's been proposed that perhaps we set aside a standard days of the week or days of the month or certain block of time for such events. So at this point in time, if any commissioner have any thought as to how we can address this issue of scheduling for future meetings, like to entertain any such thought. Cynthia?
I think one of the issues that we need to think about is apparently the full commission must act on every contract that involves staff. And I'm not sure if we'll get a different interpretation of that. So there's probably a necessity to meet multiple times a month at least, so just so we can make those decisions. So I don't see a way around that. I mean, I think especially in the beginning, we're going to have to make a lot of these decisions just to get things going on the commission.
This is per the requirement of the Voters First Act. Is we cannot this commission cannot delegate that authority to anyone else. We have to vote and approve every single contract. Is that the
with a supermajority, I think.
With the supermajority, is that the understanding?
That's my understanding. That's the way the act reads.
Okay.
That you have to vote, and you need a supermajority for all staff decisions.
All right. So I think that's probably one of the driver for having frequent meetings, at least during the first few months of this particular commission.
I want to address one other issue that affects those of us who have 5-day-a-week other jobs, and that is if we can, pick particular days perhaps of the week, if that works, but at least set aside specific days. I think our biggest difficulty, although we've all managed to get here pretty much, is the uncertainty of the schedule. So it's not enough to just say we're going to meet a couple times a month and then decide, like, oh, it's going to be next Wednesday, but so that we can plan ahead.
I also think that, given that some of us do work 5 days a week, that we should seriously consider meeting on weekends as well. We're going to have to do this anyway for public hearings to accommodate the public. Might as well get in the habit. And our only restriction on meeting over the weekend for this particular meeting is that we're meeting in a state building. So I would like to throw that consideration out, that we consider other venues that might allow us to meet on the weekend.
Well, I was going to make a similar suggestion, because I think that I would hope that we could locate a site in Southern California so that the Southern California folks don't have to do all the flying, so to speak, and get all those miles. No, no.
We want to move south for the winter anyway.
Follow those birds.
Well, I'm assuming with one of the issues that we have to deal with any other meeting, whether it be on the weekend or another location, is simply the technical aspects of it. So do we have a way to take our technical crew with us, or are we going to have to hire out for that immediately? And if so, that presents some logistical challenges to find somebody to do those things. I think that would be the biggest. I think everyone's willing to go someplace else. We can get the notice out. It's the technical aspect of this.
I mean, it might be one of the things we have to wait until we actually have an executive director who then can make the necessary phone calls to find out where there's a location that has staff and such.
So for now, maybe stay with the traditional
for the next
weekday
week or so.
here, at least until we have other
Yeah.
options to consider. Okay.
But I think that ought to be an early task.
You lost me on the discussion. The state building is not available on the weekends, period?
I don't know, I'm just, what I was saying was that the executive director would locate another facility, whether it was, we've talked about university.
No, I understand that part of it, but in terms of, I heard the conclusion that we would only meet on the weekdays. I question that as to whether that's really what we meant. If we decide to meet on the weekends here in Sacramento at a state building, is that possible?
When we scheduled this meeting back in December, the Department of General Services, who operates this building, was not allowed to work any overtime because of budgetary constraints. As far as I know, that's still in place. And the only way they could work overtime if it was an emergency. And we couldn't very well say that scheduling a meeting in advance is an emergency. So those are, because the state is so broke, they're limiting overtime. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just going to take more effort and more money to do that.
So
There's always a way to do something. It just takes more time and a little more advance notice. And because of the 14-day requirement that we had to get out at the end of December, and not having your staff on board and not, having a lot in place, we were trying to put some meetings together quickly so that you could start meeting, get your staff hired, knowing that, in February you'd probably be meeting in other locations on weekends and, as you suggested, in Southern California. So we realize this is a bit of an inconvenience for the commissioners this month, but we expect it to open up more next month.
Can everybody accept the conclusions that during the month of January, we're going to continue to meet during the weekdays in Sacramento?
Well, we have to. That's what our notice meeting is.
Right,
So.
okay. All right.
With regard to meeting here in Sacramento, and the fact that, as it was stated earlier, that some of us work, and that our agenda has an indefinite end date. We have these agendas that can roll over for multiple days, possibly, theoretically, a week or more. Do we perceive in the foreseeable future that our meetings will pretty much go the way they have this go-around, like 3 days, or do we foresee long marathon, continuous series, or if so, if it's going to be this way, I prefer to meet on a Wednesday as we did, have Thursday and Friday so we can get back to our respectful homes over the weekend and conclude our business. If this works fine for me, traveling in the middle of the week, for example, it's less hassle at the airport. I don't know if we can restrict ourselves to a 3-day maximum, I guess that's not allowable. We have to keep it open until the business is concluded, no matter how many days it takes. But this particularly,
No,
You can-
no, we can do whatever we want.
we can, okay.
We did that because of the 14-day notice requirement, and to give ourselves maximum flexibility to discuss a large number of topics, which, we didn't know
Sure.
whether we would get to them or not, or what have you, so we did it for maximum flexibility.
This 3-day arrangement just happens to work well for me and my schedule.
Okay?
And we're all going to have different opinions in that regard, given that I do work 5 days, well, actually 7 days a week, really. But, as far as the customary business days, the Wednesday is hard. If I could, and maybe Jean might agree with me on that, 3 days devoted to my usual employment might be a lot easier with commitment to at least a minimum of 2 days at this point during the week, with an assumption that it might carry over into the weekend when we're a full commission independent and we can select the venues with proper notice. But that's kind of my recommendation as a full-time employee.
Any particular 2 days that you're thinking?
Oh, the Thursday, Fridays seem, it works for my schedule. I'm not in court on Fridays, and I can obviously rearrange things right now on the Thursday, Friday schedule.
Just out of curiosity, I'm assuming it's a 2-day, do we want to consider, I don't have a preference, but I'm just wondering, do we want to consider a Monday, Tuesday, that way in case we have to go an extra day, we can do a Wednesday? Because if we do a Thursday, Friday, and we still find that we're rushed to finish our business, it's the weekend, and I'm just throwing that out as a consideration.
But as I understand it, that if we wanted to go to the weekend, then that's a logistical issue we have to address now. It might cost a few more bucks.
But that's-
Only for this month.
Yeah.
I don't see a necessity to push it, and I think, given the limited number of weeks that's left in January, I don't know that we'll get approval,
Yeah, I wouldn't.
to be honest
Yeah.
with you. I think it's impractical to consider weekend work for January at this point.
I agree.
You couldn't even get the notice out.
Oh, that's true.
And your notice indicates it
It's not weekend.
not on weekends.
Well, that's true.
So if you figure 14 days, January is pretty much
So are we
over.
considering what our schedule will be for January, or are we just talking overall to try and select particular days to have more finality?
Both.
Well, but see, there's a difference. There's a difference between the two as far as functionality. I mean, once we're up and we have an executive director and we're an independent commission, and we can provide notice for the coming months, I mean, then we've got more flexibility.
We don't have time, though, because, we're going to be mid-month very soon, and we're already going to be into February for the notice. So I think we have to actually think about February now.
Okay, well then, are you thinking about Sacramento, or are you thinking about some other location? Because at this point, if you need to provide the notice, I think it's probably best to consider Sacramento for at least February until we can get up and running. That would be my recommendation given the fact that we've got 6 new commissioners, this is their first time in as well, and getting used to this. For the next 30 days' notice for February, I would recommend that we stay in Sacramento until we actually have the definitive date upon which we are no longer under the Secretary of State and we're operating on our own. But that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, the operating reality is that we're probably going to be looking at January and February in this particular location. And then starting in March, I think at this point, we probably see a little more flexibility.
So that would mean that continuing in February, that the weekends would be out because of the overtime issue for the state. So we would be looking at the remainder of January and February as just the 5-day week until we can do
Well,
otherwise.
keeping in mind, too, that, I mean, as we see today, in the last 2 days, some people just aren't going to be able to make, we're not all going to be here every single time, so,
And that's okay.
yeah.
And what that would cause us to think about is when we know we have a vote where you need a supermajority, we better find the day that everybody's going to be here.
Right.
See, it appears the direction we're heading is blocking off Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now, perhaps we can modify that slightly, saying that we're going to hold the decisions that require supermajority to be present or to gain approval we'll try to hold those on Thursday and Friday, and then with Wednesday is trying to get a lot of the other type of, either we want to call it administrative or other kind of decision that we have to make. Would that be a general concept that we can all embrace?
Yes.
And are we talking about Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of every week at this point?
We're talking about blocking, picking
Days.
preferred days at this point. We haven't talked about
How
when the
often?
next meeting is or anything at this point in time. I would want to see if we can reach some kind of understanding, and then we can work the details as the next step, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Okay.
So can we talk about what the implications are for this month?
Just so I'm clear, on some of those days where I'm italics for flexible schedule, those are, I can easily do with just a preference for having enough notice, that it wasn't last minute. So I'm available with those.
And one further clarification for my schedule as well, I could be added for unavailability on Tuesday, the 18th, and Friday, the 21st. Unavailable.
And I'm absolutely unavailable on the 18th.
Looks like the 18th is out. We'd still have, no, we can't meet on Friday.
It's a moot point because we're not going to meet there anyway, but I'm not available on the 25th of January.
Do we have any sense as to Connie's calendar or Maria?
She's available, according to this.
They're both available, and, okay.
But we could not, according to this, we could not meet on the 21st because we wouldn't have our quotient of Republicans. Is that correct?
I could be here on the 21st.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Okay. So latter half of next week?
Sounds that way.
Yeah.
So just the
if-
20th or 21st, or are you talking about Wednesday? On Wednesday, there's quite a number of people that aren't here.
Wednesday's looking questionable.
Yeah, I could be available on the 19th, 20th, and 21st.
You can.
Yes.
So that changed.
I can be available either the 19th or the 20th, but not both.
Not both, okay.
So it would be better for me if they were contiguous.
Oh, I'm
Commissioner
available.
Parvenu, your availability on Thursday, the 20th, is that flexible or is that not available?
I can make myself available on the 20th and 21st, preferably not the 19th, because the 17th is a holiday and it's a short week, but I can make it for the 20th and 21st if necessary.
And I can make myself available on the 21st.
Okay, great.
It's subject to change for me, too. Right now, I can.
So that looks like the 20th and 21st next week.
The 19th.
It's been proposed 20 and 21st next week as being the time that we reconvene after we recess Friday. Is that acceptable at this point in time?
Yeah, it works for me.
My question is, can we project further out into the future to do
Well,
the rest of the month?
Yeah, we'll do that. I know some of you are driving 50 miles or more to get here. I think one way we can squeeze in a little bit more time is starting the meeting at 9:30 as compared to 10:30 on the first day. Is that acceptable?
9:30 works for me.
9:30?
In my
Okay.
case, I'd rather come in the night before. If we're
That's
gonna-
fine, that's
Yeah.
fine.
And the rest of the month could be 9:30 if it fits for you.
Oh, the schedule, the way we have defined it is at 9:30, okay. So plan So for sure, we're going to be reconvening the meeting on the 20th, and we probably will work all day 20th and 21st, and allow us to go home on the 22nd. How about the week following? What are your preferences? You want to continue to look at Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Are there any that would avoid the 25th, which Andres is not available?
I think having 3 days that week might be a useful thing, because hopefully by then we'll have an executive director on board. And we can start having a discussion with the executive director, just what we need to do.
I can be
Okay.
here on the 26th, 27th, 28th, but I may have to leave a little early.
Okay. I think it's understood that the probability of getting all 14 of us in a meeting is a goal and not a reality. And so as long as we have enough people to make decisions, that's really what we're looking for. All right, so the schedule for January is 20th, 21st, 26th, 27th, and 28th. Okay. Let's look into the month of February. Again, it's going to be in Sacramento.
May I just ask a question?
Sure.
I mean, right now, I'm available all those days. If something changed, that just couldn't be helped, who do we contact so that if it's not just me, but 2 or 3 other people who suddenly have an emergency and then we find we don't have a quorum?
Well, always contact staff, and
Okay.
staff will in turn notify everybody else, and then we can make a separate decision at that point in time.
Okay.
It's easy to cancel a meeting, but it's next to impossible to set up a meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for February, I think we should assume the first half of February is in Sacramento, but we might actually have someone on board who can help us maybe start scheduling stuff for the second half of February and still have adequate notice.
All right, so we want to start noticing the first half of the month and try to work the location issue on the second half. All right. So shall we go ahead and block off second, third, and fourth, which is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and 9, 10, and 11, which again is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of February?
I will not be able to participate on those days.
I will not be able to participate on Friday,
Which Friday?
February 4th.
Okay.
Neither will I.
I'll be out on the 3rd.
I will not be able to participate that week.
All right, let's try to make some decision on the first week of February. Looks like we're 1 shy on the 3rd, 1 shy on the 4th, and, I'm sorry, 2 shy on the 3rd, 2 shy on the 4th, and 1 shy.
Peter, might I suggest that we all submit our dates to staff so they can do a calendar for us? It might be more efficient for us to look at that tomorrow morning or something after we've done the month.
Okay, so you want to hold off the February scheduled decision until tomorrow morning? All right, that's fine, that's fine.
And can we, we could also, to some degree, we could put a notice out, since it sounds like we need to have the meetings in Sacramento for maybe the first 2 weeks, and it's going to be during the weekday, and depending on what happens next week and even the following week, when we already have meetings scheduled for sure, that might dictate what we need for February a little bit more. So in the meantime, we could get our schedules to staff and put a notice up, a continuously running notice, and work on the details once we have a little more idea of what we need, and then after the next 2 weeks.
Again, this does not require a decision, but just a little bit food for thought or consideration. Commissioner Antai and myself have dinner, and we discussed over dinner as to perhaps having the next available meeting, starting with the south part of the state, perhaps in San Diego. Would we want to task Gil at this point in time to try to make that happen toward the, again, if the ED is in place, we will get his help, and in the meantime, perhaps Gil would volunteer to assume that activity to see if we can line something up for the second half of February.
I certainly appreciate that. The only other comment that I would have in that regard, Commissioner Yao, is that I thought you had some connections in Claremont, or with, given your prior position with the Claremont City Council, and if you consider the number of people that are in Southern California, it is, there's more of us in Orange County, there's 3 of us in Los Angeles County, 1 in Riverside County, versus 1 in San Diego. So you're still talking about the entire commission traveling a greater distance if we considered San Diego versus more Los Angeles, Orange County area, just practically speaking, for travel costs as well.
If it's the commission's wish to task me with that assignment, I'll be happy to
I'm just saying, it's practically speaking, it might be easier when we're considering Southern California right now for general meetings, if we're going to change location, that it's probably going to be easier for a majority of people, Commissioner Blanco, myself, you, Commissioner Rea, I mean, everybody, at least, there's a larger percentage of us in Southern California right now. If we're considering that meeting, it's more convenient when you're looking at Orange County and Los Angeles than a 2-hour drive for all of us, 2.5-hour drive with traffic down there. I'm just saying, just as practically speaking, I think that's a consideration, given that I know all of the freeways down there, all of the traffic patterns. I know precisely where the traffic patterns are at every single time on every freeway in Southern California. So, if anybody had any questions about that, trust me, I even know how to get down the 5, down the 15, all the way down to San Diego, and I know it's going to be troublesome, even though I have the fast track.
It will be a pleasure to task you.
I'll even look into it if necessary.
Okay, I will accept the challenge. I have been approached by both the colleges and the city, council members on the city to host a commission meeting in the city of Claremont, if that's the wish of this commission.
Get
I
them to
think we can.
volunteer
I think I have a very high probability of making that happen. And so this will be for the second half of February.
Well, frankly, I think if you can arrange it sooner, that would be fine. I mean, I think the issue is, do we have resources on this commission who are willing to volunteer to organize it in the absence of staff? If we do, I see nothing wrong with going ahead and noticing the meeting for 7
For the first, all right, so we'll ask staff not to make any agenda announcement until,
Well, if we were to agendize the meeting on the 20th, then that would allow us to meet starting on the 3rd, correct?
Well, it's 14 days.
Right.
Yeah, so you could, the 20th.
all right, I got the message, ASAP.
Yeah, I mean, and if we
All
didn't
right.
want to meet till the 4th, then you could agendize the
Okay.
meeting on the 21st,
Okay.
so.
As soon as possible in the month of February.
Yeah.
All right, I will get back to staff on my progress.
And we'll communicate with you, but be thinking about agenda items. Since we're going to have to get out an agenda at 1 or 2, depending on where we meet in February, you might want to start thinking about agenda items, and we'll communicate with you about that.
I believe that the chair and the vice chair will work with staff to create that agenda.
However you want to do it, that's fine.
Okay.
If that works for you, that works for us.
And if any of the commissioners have items that they want to place on the agenda, notify staff. So we'll have that agenda put together, or at least the proposed agenda discussed prior to the necessary announcement date.
I might also suggest that we should be thinking about our respective committees and what the agenda items should be on the committees, and maybe we should structure this so that we have committee meetings for a day, and then we have the full commission meet to hear what the committees came up with, so we can act.
You're moving much faster than I'm ready. I'm still talking about the agenda for the entire commission. If you want to, if we think we are finished with that, then we'll move on over to the agenda for the committee.
I'm just saying we should notice it at the same time so that we can all physically be there and available to meet.
No disagreement. So in the month of February, let's don't worry about the location for the time being. On the first week, it's likely that we will be missing at least 2 commissioners on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Do we still want to meet?
As long as you have a quorum. I mean, I think we just have to be realistic. All of us are going to miss meetings.
All right, so we'll go ahead and try to do Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday on the first week of February. And how about the second week of February? So we go ahead and try to do the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday?
I would suggest that we submit our dates to staff, and they can produce this wonderful calendar for us, and then we can talk about it.
Oh, that's
tomorrow.
right. I forgot the previous decision that we made.
And if we would, based on the fact that we are all seeking, a schedule as soon as possible, again, I'd just like to mention that I do have other calendar issues, because I do have to succumb to the court's demands when I need to be in trial. But February or March is pretty open right now, so if I can get commission matters scheduled in the months ahead, it would be so much easier for me to be able to rework my regular job schedule. So for instance, I would recommend that if we're going to consider schedule, even though we don't have a location yet, maybe we want to just possibly talk about the days that we might be meeting. Maybe we can set those days aside in March. So if we could this evening provide our unavailability dates for February and March. And again, I'm just saying it's easier for me that if we can set aside those days, then I can, rather than missing, I can actually set aside my work schedule and rework my work so I can be here for commission.
All right, in general, let's say for the month of March, would 2 meetings be enough, or do we want to exceed 2 meetings during the month of March? In other words, I think we pretty much decide on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so it's either the first or third week, or second or fourth week, or some combination of such.
Before we go into March and start locking that in, it could well be that by sometime in March, we're beginning to do outreach meetings. And so that I think would affect the whole commission meetings.
That will be above and beyond
Right.
the meetings that at
Right,
least
but
I'm
we might
contemplating
not
at
want
this
to
point.
tie up ourselves on commission meetings if we have a heavy load of.
Again, my thought is it's a lot easier to cancel
Okay.
the meeting than it is to try to schedule it. If we have an outreach meeting, then we simply cancel the meeting, cancel the regular meeting, or make adjustment accordingly. I think the sense I have is that we think we need to meet regularly and often at the beginning phase of this project in order to make sure the project gets going correctly. And on that basis, is there any preference as to the first or third week or the second or fourth week? We can always change it. I'm not asking for commitment at this point, but again, if you're looking for any kind of planning calendar, I think this probably would be the best way to set it.
And you can think about it, just a possibility, if we're looking at maybe the first week of the month, then doing outreach in the 2 middle weeks of the month, and then following up with a regular meeting at the end of the month. So if we were looking maybe the first week, and the fourth week would be our regular commission meetings, then we can jam-pack the middle of the month with outreach meetings and the weekend meetings, the evening meetings, and then sum it all up maybe at the end of the month and look forward to the next one.
While you're talking, I suspect that the outreach meeting probably be more likely on the weekends as compared to
Oh,
be on
sure.
the
I'm just
weekdays.
saying
Okay,
that
so
looking at
so there may
the
or may
weeks,
not be
that's
any real conflict there.
I was actually hoping we would start the outreach in February, but we'll have to see what the committee comes up with.
So would you like to block off some of the dates in March? I guess that's the question.
Let's just put them down, and then we can make a judgment.
My suggestion is we just turn in our unavailability sheets to
Yeah.
Ann, and then
All
we'll
right.
see what we get tomorrow morning, then we can finalize
Okay.
and further up this discussion
Okay.
tomorrow morning.
Okay. Let's try to do one more thing before we quit. How about the subcommittees meetings?
We can't do it yet. We have no notice.
No, I'm talking about February, March.
Well,
So my suggestion was that we try to schedule relevant committee meetings, either probably immediately preceding the full commission meeting, so that the committee can discuss and hash things out and come up with alternatives and options and be ready to present recommendations to the full commission, and the commission can act on it shortly thereafter, because those meetings will have to be noticed, and probably we want to live stream those also, so we should use the same facilities. So that's my suggestion, just from a logistics standpoint. Otherwise, we're going to have, quintuple the number of problems in scheduling.
the only problem about live streaming, I mean, again, I think you're right as far as scheduling, and one thing I had possibly suggested is that when we get into and have provided the proper notice on these subcommittees, in the beginning, if we consider obviously holding them maybe as breakout sessions, like in this room, is one thing I was thinking, but we do have to keep in mind that one person may want to be on multiple committees. But if we provide the public notice, and then attendees here could, and if we worked them out simultaneously, then we are all working, even though, again, I might be on more than one committee, and it might be hard to do that. But I don't know that it's productive to do them one at a time in order to capture the live streaming. And I don't know, I'm just saying it might be workable that we can provide the appropriate notice, members of the public can be here, find out where the breakout groups are on the subcommittees they're interested in, and they can sit and listen to what we have to say in our subcommittees, and I think that might be workable.
Right.
And the summary of all those subcommittees, of course, will be live streamed and all of that. So
Yeah.
We come
certainly
back
that's
and we
not a
report.
problem. Yeah.
So,
Probably, I don't know that, we're certainly not obligated to live stream all the subcommittee meetings, but I think that it would be probably worthwhile to look at, and this is something we'll get our executive director to look at least having transcripts of each meeting, of the subcommittee meetings.
I'm sorry, I have to duck out to be at my store at 5.
Bye, Stan.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
now I have the microphone on myself.
Take care.
Live streaming certainly is a noble objective, but we can certainly do a lot of other things along the way, perhaps just simply videotape it and then put it on the web, because we're not making any decisions
Right.
during any of these subcommittees, okay? And as far as videotaping anything, a $100 video camera pointed in the right direction would do it, so.
Right.
As compared to having high bandwidth to do the streaming. So these are some of the things. These are some of the things that we could consider. Maybe when we come back and discuss the schedule, maybe we can also discuss that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else we want to take care of as far as scheduling is concerned? Does staff have enough direction from the commission at this point to proceed with the understanding that location and some of these things will be determined ASAP?
So I guess our understanding is we're going to get the info from you, and we're going to do the calendars, and then there'll be some discussion about what you want in the notice, and we'll figure that out and get the notices out. As long as we got the notices out, we can retract meetings. It's just, you can, and as long as we let people know, then we'll have done it in good faith. And I think that you grasp that. The problem is having a meeting when you don't have a notice is absolutely verboten. That's where you don't have flexibility at all.
Okay, so we're going to continue the scheduled meeting when we convene tomorrow morning, first thing, second thing, last thing? What's your preference?
Well, we have some interviews tomorrow morning.
At 10, I think, is the first one, am I correct? Okay, as I recall.
So we have an
So
hour
we need to
before the
start at
interview.
9:30 and then go.
Right. We are starting at 9:30.
Yeah.
9:30.
So we'll resume the discussion of the schedule at 9:30 tomorrow for 45 minutes or so before we,
No, our next interviewee is at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, so we need to come back in
Oh, at
here,
10 or
open up the
10:30?
record, go into closed session from 10 to lunch. Am I correct?
I'm sorry.
First interview is at 10?
At 10. It's at 10, so you'll just have a few minutes tomorrow morning. You'll be
All
here
right,
at
we'll
9:30.
open up, but won't have an opportunity to discuss it until after the interview. All right, so we'll recess this meeting until approximately what time tomorrow, the open session? Any estimate?
9:30.
Oh, I'm sorry, 9:30, and then we'll go into closed session, and then we'll resume the general meeting at approximately what time?
After lunch.
Okay, immediately after lunch at around 1:15, 1 o'clock.
Well, you can just see how the interviews go. You come back down here.
Yeah, this is certainly just an estimate at this point, but I do want to give the public an estimate as to when we're going to be reconvening in the open session.
I think 1:15 is a good time.
All right, 1:15. All right, if there's nothing further, we'll recess the meeting at this point until 9:30 Friday morning. Thank you.